For decades, a horrifying pattern of abuse has plagued towns across the UK. Vulnerable young girls, many in the care system, were targeted by predatory gangs. These gangs, often composed of British Pakistani men, exploited these girls. The girls were groomed, trafficked, and subjected to horrific sexual abuse. The scale of this abuse is staggering. Thousands of victims have come forward, but the true number remains unknown. The trauma inflicted on these young lives is immeasurable, leaving lasting scars. The abuse often followed a similar pattern. The girls, often from troubled backgrounds, were lured by gifts, attention, and promises of friendship. They were then plied with drugs and alcohol, making them more vulnerable to exploitation. Once trapped, the girls were passed around the gang's members and their associates. They were subjected to rape, sexual assault, and violence. Fear and intimidation kept them silent. The victims often felt unable to escape their abusers. They faced threats of violence against themselves and their families. The perpetrators often used their victims' vulnerabilities against them. They knew that their victims were less likely to be believed or taken seriously. This abuse continued for years, often hidden in plain sight. The victims, silenced by fear and shame, suffered in silence. The perpetrators, emboldened by lack of accountability, continued their reign of terror. It is a stain on our society that such widespread abuse could occur for so long. The shocking truth about these grooming gangs began to emerge slowly and painfully. Whistleblowers within the police and social services tried to raise the alarm, only to be ignored or silenced. It took the courage of survivors to come forward and share their stories for the true extent of the abuse to be revealed. One of the most high-profile cases was in Rotherham. The J report, published in 2014, revealed that an estimated 1,400 children had been sexually exploited in the town between 1997 and 2013. The report exposed a horrific catalogue of abuse, including rape, trafficking, and abduction. Similar patterns of abuse were uncovered in other towns and cities across the UK, including Telford, Rochdale, and Oxford. Each inquiry revealed a failure to protect vulnerable children and a culture of denial and disbelief within the authorities. These inquiries sparked public outrage and demands for justice. They also highlighted the systemic failures that allowed this abuse to flourish for so long. The investigations and inquiries into these grooming gangs revealed a catalogue of systemic failures. Police and social services tasked with protecting vulnerable children failed to do so. The reasons for these failures are complex and multifaceted. One significant factor was a culture of political correctness and fear of being labelled racist. The perpetrators were predominantly of South Asian heritage, and there was a reluctance to investigate or prosecute them for fear of inflaming community tensions. This fear allowed the abuse to continue unchecked, with devastating consequences for the victims. Another factor was a failure to listen to and believe the victims. Many of the girls came from troubled backgrounds and were seen as unreliable witnesses. Their claims were often dismissed as child prostitution rather than child sexual exploitation. This failure to recognize the power dynamics at play allowed the perpetrators to act with impunity. The authorities also failed to share information and work together effectively. Police, social services, and other agencies often operated in silos, with information not being passed on or acted upon. This lack of coordination allowed the abusers to operate under the radar and avoid detection. The fight for justice for the victims of these grooming gangs continues. Many perpetrators remain unpunished, and grooming gangs continue to operate in towns and cities across the UK. Much work remains to be done to address the systemic failures that allowed this abuse to occur and to ensure that it never happens again. We need a complete overhaul of the way we protect vulnerable children. We need to listen to and believe victims regardless of their background or circumstances. We need to challenge the culture of political correctness that prevents us from tackling difficult issues. The fight for justice will not be easy. It will require courage, determination, and a commitment to change. But we must never give up on the victims of these horrific crimes. We owe it to them to create a society where all children are safe from abuse and exploitation.